Hello, my name is Dr. Wes Sublett. I will be presenting office-based research. What does it really involve? Listed are the objectives for today's lecture. We will explore the benefits of adding office-based research. We will gain insights on the various types of research opportunities. And lastly, we will identify key components needed for office-based research. Clinical research is much different from clinical care. In clinical care, we address the needs of the individual patient. Clinical care is intended to benefit the individual patient by using real-time decisions and using products and procedures accepted by the medical community as safe and effective. In clinical research, we answer specific questions through research involving numerous research volunteers. Clinical research is intended to produce generalizable knowledge to benefit future patients. It involves the periodic and systemic assessment of patients based on a protocol and tests products and procedures of unproven benefit to the patient. It is important to note that only 3% of physicians participate in clinical trials. Clinical research is a highly regulated space. If one chooses to participate in clinical trials as an investigator, one should work and document audit ready. The primary goals of an audit are to ensure the rights and welfare of human research participants are protected, that the data was collected accurately and recorded in a timely manner, that there was appropriate accountability, dispensing, and storage of the investigational product, and that the research complies with federal regulations, state laws, and institutional policies. The best way to prepare for an audit is to ensure compliance from the beginning of the study. So what are the benefits of office-based research? There are many benefits. For example, there may be benefits to your patients. Eligible patients may benefit by gaining access to new and possibly effective treatments available only to those participating in a clinical trial. Patients also have a chance to help society and other people with their condition by contributing to medical research that advances the science. Patients usually receive a monetary incentive as well to participate because of their time and travel. Research plays a crucial role in advancing medical knowledge and improving patient care. Trials involve rigorous testing of new drugs, treatments, or interventions on human subjects to determine their safety, effectiveness, and potential side effects to be later used in clinical care. Research may benefit your practice reputation because you may be considered up to date with the latest approaches if you're participating in clinical research. As an investigator, one is constantly learning about developing technology or new pharmaceutical agents in development. You learn about their risk, their benefits, and their side effects, as well as mechanisms of action. Lastly, clinical research can be an alternative income stream. Many times participation in clinical trials will provide compensation because of the extra time and effort involved with trial participation and the level of care you are providing. Research types vary greatly based on what is being studied. Research can generally be categorized into observational or experimental and be described by the funding source. From a review of clinicaltrials.gov, the majority of office-based research currently in the allergy and immunology space is industry-sponsored Phase 2 and Phase 3 clinical research trials of investigational products. However, other research modalities are available, from patient registries to environmental interventions. There are many types of research one could pursue if the available patient types and clinical resources are appropriate. As an example, Besides industry-sponsored clinical trials, our research site has had the opportunity to participate in a study using digital health technology to improve asthma outcomes in a data-driven collaboration among public, private, and philanthropic organizations that was backed by a large private foundation, as well as collaborate with an academic center on an NIH-funded study of vitamin D oral replacement in children with obesity-related asthma. A principal investigator, or PI, is the person responsible for overseeing a clinical trial, research grant, or other sponsored research project. While the PI may delegate responsibility for some project activity to others, the PI is ultimately responsible for all facets of the conducted research at their site. Some of the responsibilities of the PI include personally conducting and supervising the research, ensuring that study personnel and other participating physicians are qualified and trained, ensuring that the clinical research participants are protected and that the research methodologies are in compliance, overseeing the IRB approval and compliance process, ensuring the integrity of the data collected, and developing budgets for the research projects themselves, and lastly, managing audits and all inspections. One should equip the practice with the infrastructure it needs to conduct clinical research by allocating appropriate dedicated space. Allocated research space would include an exam room for clinical trials, secure storage for supplies and records, secure space to store drugs with monitored refrigerators and freezers if needed, a lab for specimen processing and storage, dedicated space for research-related equipment, a dedicated space for monitors and auditors, and lastly, long-term secure storage for record retention. A sponsor will likely perform a site inspection before the study site is approved for a trial to ensure the practice is well equipped and prepared to execute the trial effectively and efficiently. A clinical research coordinator, or CRC, is a key component to clinical research. A clinical research coordinator manages and conducts the day-to-day activities of a clinical trial. The principal investigator determines the CRC's specific responsibilities and works closely with the CRC. In general, the CRC ensures the clinical study maintains accordance with protocol, applicable regulations, good clinical practice or GCP, and institutional review board requirements. Beyond administrative duties, responsibilities of a CRC may include acting as a liaison for the clinical site, ensuring staff are properly trained per the protocol, recruiting or registering participants, maintaining study guidelines, collecting and or reviewing the data, or reviewing before it is entered into the study database. A CRC usually has a bachelor's degree in a scientific, health-related, or business administration program. When a CRC is a registered nurse, they may be called a clinical research nurse coordinator, or CRNC. Standard operating procedures, or SOPs, are a cornerstone of effective clinical research, providing clear guidelines and instructions for consistent practices. SOPs are detailed written procedures that outline standard practices and processes within an organization or research site. They serve as a roadmap, ensuring that everyone involved follows the same steps. SOPs usually should cover administrative tasks, clinical tasks, data management, laboratory tasks, and lastly, pharmacy. These are essential for good clinical trial research. Forming a relationship with an institutional review board, or IRB, is critical for clinical research. Institutional review boards, or IRBs, review research studies to ensure that they comply with applicable regulations and meet commonly accepted ethical standards, follow institutional policies, and adequately protect research participants. The goal of the IRB review is to assure that the rights and welfare of participating research subjects are adequately protected in the pursuit of the proposed research study. Local IRBs are often found at universities, and they are usually staffed by people who work at a university, whereas central IRBs are for multi-center studies, and the IRB conducts reviews on the behalf of all study sites that agree to participate in a centralized review process. You may be required to work with both local and central IRBs depending on your individual situation. Good clinical practice, or GCP training, is required for clinical research. Good clinical practice is an international ethical and scientific quality standard for designing, conducting, recording, and reporting trials that involve the participation of human subjects. Compliance with this standard provides public assurance that the rights, safety, and well-being of trial subjects are protected, which is consistent with the principles in the Declaration of Helsinki. It was first established in 1996 and was last updated in 2023. In January of 2017, the NIH implemented a policy mandating that all NIH-funded clinical investigators and clinical trial staff be trained in GCP. Whether GCP training is required depends on the type of study being conducted. So who needs to complete GCP training? Principal investigators, as well as individuals involved in identifying recruiting subjects, obtaining consents, or interacting and intervening with subjects when the study meets the NIH definition of a clinical trial and evaluates a drug, device, or biologic, or is conducted under one or more INDs, then you will need to be trained. The other time that you will need to be trained is if the study meets the NIH definition of a clinical trial and is NIH funded. Besides GCP training, Human Subjects Protections, or HSP training, is required for clinical research. HSP training focuses on the U.S. Common Rule, regulations, and requirements, including the ethical principles associated with protecting the human participants in research and the codified protection methods such as institutional review board oversight and criteria for an appropriate informed consent process. HSP training is required for all individuals involved in human subject research studies, exempt and non-exempt, who have contact with subjects or their identifiable data. So now that you have set up your research site and you've done the appropriate training, how do you go about finding research trials? One way is to connect with the pharmaceutical medical science liaison about potential trials that are ongoing at their particular industry sponsor. Another way is to network at national meetings, which is a great way to talk to different sponsors about ongoing trials. One should form relationships with the local academic center, as some NIH grants may require participation outside of the academic center. One could search clinicaltrials.gov for leads of potential enrolling studies and contact the sponsors directly. And lastly, the best way to find trials is to gain experience. As one participates in clinical trials, more clinical trials usually follow. So now that you have found a trial, it's time to recruit patients to enter the trial. There are many ways to recruit patients for an individual trial. The most common and main source is using your own patients. You can query a chart or EHR to identify potential subjects for a trial. You can also do direct advertising, either in traditional or digital media, about the clinical trial. Patient support groups are a great resource for potential patients with a specific condition. And lastly, you can approach outside healthcare providers in attempts to recruit patients from their clinic. It is important to know the protocol, inclusion and exclusion criteria, forwards and backwards, as clinical research participants are often not reflective of the real-world patients we see in clinic due to eligibility criteria. When approaching a patient, we need to address therapeutic misconception and evaluate potential benefits, risk, and alternatives of enrolling in a clinical trial. If you're new to clinical research, it is important to seek a mentor. Mentors who are active in research are a wealth of knowledge and experience. Mentors can provide guidance, support, and knowledge to aspiring researchers. By sharing their expertise, mentors can guide one through the complexities of research. They can provide valuable insights of what has worked well for them and what has not. These insights can help you navigate challenges, avoid common pitfalls, and ensure the quality of one's own research. Mentors can be a key part in expanding your professional network within the research space. Mentors can help you build connections leading to future collaborations and opportunities. Lastly, mentors can keep one informed and knowledgeable about the current state of the field. They can share new developments, keep one informed about the latest research findings, and help one understand the implications of emerging technologies and techniques in research. So in wrapping up, some final thoughts. Just know that there is a significant need for additional practices providing research opportunities. And while the process to begin can be overwhelming, understanding the key components needed for research is critical for being successful. And lastly, find a good mentor. Mentors are going to be a key to avoiding pitfalls and having success down the road.